Walking along the roots of Pikes Peak, you wonder at all these strange indentations in the ground. They're 30 feet across and appear at regular intervals along the path. Climbing to the top of one of the hills, you finally look down at them, and it hits you. They're the footprints of something gigantic. A distant roar from the other side of the mountain sends you running inside the Anselm Society digital pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and the etymology of the word kaiju. At a corner table by the fire are four men. One of them is arguing that the new MonsterVerse will never reach its full potential until they introduce Mothra's fairy protectors. And that person's me, Matthew Mellema, your host of Believe to See. Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. The Anselm Society is a coalition of churches across the Front Range of Colorado dedicated to one very simple goal, a renaissance of the Christian imagination. To do this, we have all sorts of events. We have a regular slate of concerts, lectures, and other things, COVID permitting, of course, designed to foster love and understanding of arts and faith. And we have our own Guild of Artists, and some of us artists like to podcast, therefore Believe to See. To find out more about the Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And to really help out the show, why don't you rate and review us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts? Your 5-star reviews help us a ton, increase visibility of the show, and you know all this by now, so please do it. And then I won't have to keep harassing you with all this stuff. But to the topic at hand, this is a topic I've been waiting a long time to have, and sort of topic I feel like a lot of my nerddom has been building up to for years, but I needed the right event, the right inciting incident, to use the story language. And finally, we have it. I'm talking, of course, about Godzilla, the kaiju, and all the other monsters in the MonsterVerse. As we're recording this, Godzilla vs. Kong debuted about a week ago. It'll probably be several weeks by the time this posts, but it's still Godzilla, King Kong fever still sweeping the nation, probably. And to discuss this properly, I needed to bring in my all-star group of Godzilla experts. You are probably already familiar with my two brothers because they joined me to talk about another very serious topic, Bigfoot. Now I'm bringing them back for Godzilla. Shows you the sort of things we discussed in our house growing up. So Jeremy and Brian, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Thanks for having me too.
Oh, don't mention it. And because this is such a special occasion, we thought I'd bring in the honorary fourth Mellema brother. I'm not sure if he wants to be a Mellema brother, but he's in the club whether he likes it or not. That is our cousin, Drew Lorette. Drew, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So we all grew up on Godzilla films, and since we all share a grandfather, there's a pretty logical way that we all got hooked on these. But before we get into Godzilla, in this show, I want to talk about Godzilla, the movies, everything from the serious to the silly. Can you make a Godzilla movie that actually makes important points? Can it be beautiful and good, or are they just silly fun? These are just some of the things we'll discuss. And also, who should win a fight between Godzilla and Kong? Because that's the national dialogue right now. But first, before we get into all of that, let's just get a little bit of background. So just explain briefly who you are and what got you into Godzilla in the first place. Start with you, Jer.
I'm Jeremy. People call me Jer. I live in New York City. I'm a history, psychology, and government and economics teacher. And I started watching Godzilla stuff at our grandparents' house because Grandpa recorded them all on his VHSs.
Oh, yes. So you listeners, you should know, our grandpa had this habit where he would just go through the TV guide, it's back in the olden times, and find all the movies he wanted to record, and then just record them on VHS. He had this whole labyrinth downstairs in the basement of all of his recorded movie libraries. It was truly a wonder, and a lot of them were Godzilla movies. Brian, same thing with you.
Yeah, I'm Brian. I am living in Colorado Springs. I'm an art director for a magazine, and my Godzilla origin story is the same as Jeremy. I'm sure all of us are probably be pretty similar with that. But yeah, Grandpa, I have vivid memories of watching all those VHSs in their basement.
All right, Drew, same thing for you. A little bit about yourself, your origin story. Can we go 4 for 4?
Hi, my name's Drew Lorette, and I am the fourth Mellema honorary brother. I'm a physical therapist. I live in Georgetown, Texas, which is near Austin. And yeah, like everybody else, Grandpa Bob was the one that got me hooked on Godzilla. But he brought it all the way down from Colorado to Dallas, and I guess he had his travel pack of VHSs, but that was one of them for sure that got me hooked. So,
All right, so let's talk about this. Obviously, we all got hooked because of Grandpa Bob showing us all of his old VHSs. So let's go back when we're kids. Grandpa showing us these. What are the first movies that you saw, and what about it as a kid captured you about Godzilla? Jared, we'll start with you again.
I feel like, in addition to like the original black and white one from like the 50s, like we watched that one, but we were also really into the cartoon show with Godzilla and Godzuki that was on
Yes.
Cartoon Network all the time, which was a very weird show. Godzuki could fly around and had wings. And I also remember we all felt bad for saying the word Godzilla, so we would just call him Zilla and Zuki. Which is funny now. I know a dog named Zilla, so I think of that quite a bit. But I think
Okay.
that's kind of like the first. We got really into the cartoon, which I think bled over into more of the movies.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I will add what you said. We were afraid to say Godzilla because that God, and that seemed like sort of not appropriate. But then I remember one day we were on vacation and I was like, I'm pretty sure the rule doesn't apply. I think I can say Godzilla. I think I can say it. So I said it. And then Jeremy, you went and tattled on me right away. It's like, Mom, Matthew swore.
Oh, that seems about right.
All right, Brian, same with you. What movies stuck out to you and what drew you to the Godzilla films when you were really small?
I have no recollection of this cartoon, so I think that was a little before my time.
Brian is the baby of the family, in
I
case
am.
any listeners.
I
Yeah.
am. But the movie that is weirdly most vivid to me, I remember it was this kid living in Tokyo, and then somehow he gets teleported to like the world of monsters.
Oh, yeah.
But like all the monsters are more like puppety people in costumes fighting.
Is that the one with Manila?
I think that's.
The one with the baby Godzilla?
Yeah,
Yep,
so
that's
that
the one.
one's.
That's the baby Godzilla one, yeah. It's because he's really cute in it. But yeah, they help protect the kid from all these monsters. That's the one that sticks out to me most.
That's a really trippy one. Yeah,
It
we'll
is,
get into
it's
Monster
weird.
Island.
That is a
and
weird one.
Godzilla's adopted
Yep.
son, Manila.
Yep.
Everything. I think the kid like foils a bank robbery at the end.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
Those movies went some places.
Maybe that's why it stuck in my head so much, because it's so weird.
Drew, same question with you. What were the ones that you watched the most, and which ones grabbed you?
I didn't have Cartoon Network, so I definitely didn't get hooked on that. So I'm guessing it's just that I watched the black and white version enough where I bugged my parents to search for other Godzilla movies, and then I just came across I had 3, I remember, and I just would watch those over and over. One was Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, Godzilla Monster Island, I remember that, and then some other one I can't remember.
I remember watching one of those with you at your house one time, Drew. It was one of the ones where Godzilla would talk for some reason. So
Oh yeah, that was Godzilla versus Gigan, I think.
that's the one. That is a straight up classic, and I
Yeah.
can't wait to talk about it. So yeah, basically, I think we all have similar reasons why we're interested in it, and the interest has kept going, and it kept going through the very brand spanking new Godzilla versus Kong movies. But before we get into those, I want to give a very brief history lesson because I've gone on a deep dive thanks to Godzilla versus Kong. I just can't get enough of this stuff. So I've been looking through the history of Godzilla, and I think it's actually interesting independently. But the good thing about having my family here is when I have like Evangeline or Mandy co-hosts, they're both so nice they won't interrupt me when I'm going off on weird tangents. But I know you guys will, so if I start rambling, just let me know. Okay, so
I also did research, so I'll make sure that you're telling people an accurate
Okay. I have the history teacher
Keep you in
grading my
check.
history lesson right now. Yeah. So there have been like 30 something Godzilla movies made by this point. First one was made in 1954, and it's something of a classic. Like, it's very serious, it's very dark, very brooding, and it comes out basically less than a decade after Hiroshima, Nagasaki, so World War II. So Japan's dealing with these very serious issues that just rock them to the core. And Godzilla comes to, he sort of represents that. He's the symbol of sort of primal power, but also like nuclear power and the things that can happen when mankind's use of its technology gets out of hand. So very serious issues that's going with. But then you can see the Japanese movie producers be like, hey, people are seeing this. We can make money. So then we go through the whole rest of this Showa era from 1954 to 1975, where Godzilla becomes increasingly more cartoony. The movies are increasingly more for kids. He's fighting increasingly ridiculous monsters and robots and aliens and everything. But then we get to the Heisei era, 1984 to 1995, and they try to make him gritty and real again. So they like ditch everything that happened and go, hey, we'll do this again, and it'll be gritty, real, nuclear, warning story. But then it gets silly again. So like the last ones are Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2, Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, and Godzilla versus Destroya. That's all you need to know about how serious those films were at the end. So we have the Millennium Era, Godzilla 2000 in Japan, which same pattern happens. And meanwhile, we have what's going on in America right now. We had the 1998 Godzilla film that was widely panned by critics. I loved it because I was 12 when it came
widely
out.
loved by the Mellemas.
Yes.
We were so mad there was never a Godzilla 2 because it was perfect setup with the eggs laid in
It
Madison
was.
Square Garden.
I'm still mad about that.
They had a trilogy planned. It's just everyone outside of the Mellema household hated it. We all loved it.
Well, everybody else was wrong.
I loved it too.
So here's how much they hated it in Japan. That Godzilla is not even part of the canon anymore. They renamed that creature Zilla, and he's not in the Godzilla Club. So, yeah. But then we go to the present day where we have the new MonsterVerse that's been going on since 2014 and culminating with this fourth film, Godzilla vs. Kong. So basically my 30,000 foot view of this is for each of the big eras, the movies start off very serious. Godzilla is this force of nature, this cautionary tale for man reaching too far and meddling with forces of nature beyond its control and it turning back on them. And then as the movies go, they keep getting sillier and sillier and sillier until we do a reset. So that is my big view of it. Jeremy, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's also right before the first Godzilla was released, the United States was still testing nuclear weapons like pretty close to the coast of Japan. And one of the bombs was like much more powerful than they thought, and it actually contaminated a bunch of tuna and poisoned a bunch of Japanese people and killed this whole boat of fishermen because the blast was much more powerful. And then that was one of like the reasons why Godzilla was kind of like the emblem of like America testing nuclear weapons still, and then those things destroying Japan like the atomic bombs did during World War II. So it's like, yeah, the history of it is like very interesting because it's also some of the first Japanese pop culture to come to the United States after the World Wars, and now like Japanese pop culture is like American pop culture. Like anime is huge now, and so it's interesting that like thinking about nuclear annihilation and all of that led to like the emergence of anime, which is one of like the biggest global phenomenons now.
Yeah,
which
that
I feel
relation.
like Godzilla touches that too, because it has like the cartoony, fun campiness, but also kind of the serious undertones that a lot of anime also has.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the connections there between the American pop culture and Japanese pop culture they're really fascinating because like I said, today it's ubiquitous. Like they're the same thing. There's so much crossover. They gave us Nintendo, we gave them baseball, and it's all one big thing, and we don't think anything of it. But back in the day, this was pretty fraught, because they just finished a war. So the film Godzilla was coming over to the United States, but they didn't want to play it as is. So and it's so ridiculous. I'm so mad they did this. They spliced in an American character named Raymond Burr, who's like this American reporter, to like go and they like shoehorn him into the scene. So there's an American in there, which made the American version way worse than the Japanese version, but it shows how fraught this thing was. And to the Japanese point, definitely the overarching theme of Godzilla in that first movie was, nuclear power, as represented by what you said, Jeremy, the United States, all these other things. But there's also this sort of minority report view of Godzilla representing like the Japanese spirit. So like it's like this Japanese nationalist thing. It's like, hey, no. This is the spirit of Japan. It'll rise again and all this stuff. So that's obviously very fraught too. So there's all these serious things. But then 3 movies in, literally the third movie was Godzilla versus King Kong, and it was really campy and really silly. So it's really weird how this goes. That's a little bit of the history. So Drew, you grew up on the original Godzilla and some of the sillier, campier ones. Which ones do you like better? And is it jarring to watch them both in both right next to each other?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to look at them both together because you look at Godzilla as, well, at least I did, as like the alpha of all animals or monsters, and so it is, to me, it's more weird to see him like goofy. Like I remember I thought it was weirder to see in Monster Island because he was definitely a lot more goofy there. But I think I like seeing him be a little more serious just because to me that's how he's supposed to be depicted.
Yeah, and it's weird. It's almost like Godzilla's got the Batman treatment, where everyone who does Batman, it's either super dark and gritty or it's like campy. There's really nothing in between. Brian, when you think Godzilla, do you think the serious destroyer of worlds, or do you think the campy little cartoon character on Monster Island?
I agree with Drew. I think I agree that I enjoy the more serious ones more. But like I said at the beginning, like my most vivid memory as a child is the more campy ones. But I definitely enjoy seeing them now more the serious ones, and that's all I have to say.
We may be departing from seriousness in the recent ones, but let's not jump ahead of ourselves. Jeremy, so question for you. It seems like that there is this repeating pattern in the different eras where you start serious and then it sort of gets goofier as it goes along. Why do you think that keeps happening?
I'm not sure why it keeps happening. Probably because people like watching gigantic monsters fight. Like, it's fun. So it's like you get your point across, and then it's like, okay, now who's Godzilla going to fight? Because there's only so many times, or like so many cities that Godzilla can destroy. Like when I was watching the MonsterVerse ones, like I feel like they killed about 2 billion people at least in the movies.
Yep.
And it's like you can't just keep having them destroy Earth or else there's nothing left. So they have to fight something else. And so it's like, okay, how are we going to have Godzilla keep fighting things? Oh, let's make a Monster Island.
Yep. Or let's introduce aliens, and like the aliens' plot to conquer Earth is always Godzilla mind controlled, and they'll introduce Ghidorah, the alien. So yeah, it always keeps spiraling.
So I think it's kind of that spiral where it's like, okay, that was cool. We need to do a next one. Okay, now the world is destroyed. What are we going to have Godzilla do next?
Which is also funny because in the new ones too, like Godzilla is portrayed as like the guardian of the world almost, but yet he keeps destroying the world in order to protect it.
To make an omelet, you have to break a few eggs, Brian.
Exactly.
Drew, what do you think? Because it is really interesting. Because one of the issues I wanted to talk about is, can you make a serious Godzilla movie that makes a good point, or is Godzilla just silly fun? And the answer is, depends on which movie. There are, like the original 1954 Godzilla movie, it's a cinematic masterpiece. It really is. But so many of the other ones aren't. So what are some lessons we should take from just that this keeps happening? That this warning to Japan on surviving nuclear war becomes silly slapstick within like 10 years.
I guess it kind of just shows that having a movie that is so out there can't remain serious for long because just because eventually, like Jeremy was saying, like since he is, and they keep making him larger and larger, so it's like he can't, like Earth is only so big and only has so many cities to destroy, so eventually you have to get creative, like they'll have to send him to space to protect Earth from space invaders, or like he'll grow wings somehow and be able to fly in the sky and fight in the sky. So I don't know. I guess it's just eventually the plot just gets more slapstick because it has to.
Yeah. No,
I did see something on the internet about the growing Godzilla size, and there was two main theories about why Godzilla keeps growing. The first is to keep track of like the Tokyo skyline, like as new buildings rose, Godzilla was getting bigger. But then these two like nerdy professors mapped out the amount of spending on the military worldwide and found like the regression line of that and saw that Godzilla's growth matched almost perfectly to the amount of military spending was the same amount of height growth for Godzilla.
Wow.
So they hypothesized that Godzilla was growing as the world was spending more on military, and it was just he was growing because the threat of war was also growing.
I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense though if you think about it, because it's like the Godzilla now, if he was the size of Godzilla in the like his origin story, you would be like, well, why can't we just shoot him with our
big guns? Look at these rockets over here.
Yeah, like our battle.
We have jets.
Yeah, like it's like obviously we could kill him with those if he's only that size, but now that he's gigantic, like, yeah, of course those can't hurt him. So that actually, I like that theory. It makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense.
So yeah, the original 1954 one, Godzilla is 50 meters tall, so like 150 feet. In the most recent MonsterVerse, he's like 390, something like that. And then I don't know if you guys had a chance to see this yet. There's this new mini series on Netflix, Godzilla: Planet of the Monsters.
The anime series.
Yeah. I like the first episode a lot. It takes place in the future. Godzilla has destroyed Earth and just like taken it over. And this band of Earthlings with aliens, it gets out there. Okay. They need to come back and try to take Earth back. And Godzilla's like 1,000-foot, like Titan from Greek mythology or something. So it's interesting the things that happen with that. Okay. So now let's switch gears from talking about all of Godzilla to this new one. And again, this new MonsterVerse, it's American. It started in 2014. There have currently been 4 films in this series. There was Godzilla in 2014. There was Kong Skull Island in, what was that, like 2016? Godzilla King of the Monsters in 2019. And Godzilla vs. Kong that just came out a few weeks ago. So I want to sit with this one because we are all fresh from seeing Godzilla vs. Kong. I just want to sort of take stock of where it is. So, Brian, let's start with you. What are your overall thoughts on this current MonsterVerse? What is it doing representing the Godzilla characters?
I mean, I love it. I think it has all the perfect notes that you want in monster movies today, I think it is enough of a nod, where Godzilla is kind of this guardian titan type of thing. And I really like that plot line for him because it makes you want to root for him a little bit too. And then, yeah, I think each storyline just kind of kept building on it and, gets a little more, like we kept saying too, it's like they get a little more outrageous. But in this one, the outrageous isn't so like funny. It's more just like awesome because big monsters are fighting.
You'll take the ridiculous to have the fight, yeah.
Yeah. Yep, there's always just enough plot to get by. So,
how about you, Drew? What's your take on the current MonsterVerse?
I really like it, and I think it's a lot of that. I'm just happy that I guess I'm a sucker for nostalgia, so I'm happy that they made it. And I mean, the graphics are a lot better than what they were in the 60s or 70s or whenever they were made. So I've been happy with them because I don't know. I just love. Always had a special spot for Godzilla.
Yeah, I will say along the graphics line. So obviously, for the huge majority of the Godzilla movies, Godzilla was a dude in in this elaborate costume, and then he'd sort of crush through this model of Tokyo, and that got some really unintentionally awesome clips. I was watching Godzilla versus Gigan, who's like this space monster that he fights, and they show Gigan flying in from space with King Ghidorah. It's a whole nother thing, listeners. Don't worry. And it's literally a model that they're like dragging on a string coming in from space, and then it's just the guys in the monster suits just like pummeling each other. It's the weirdest thing that I love. Jeremy, your take on the current MonsterVerse?
I just finished watching them all in preparation for this.
Jeremy does his homework, people.
And I will say, I like the MonsterVerse. I like that they're trying to have like this bigger story that connects different things. I think definitely the weakest of all the movies is Godzilla King of the Monsters. I feel like they focus too much on like a human story and no one really cares about the human story.
That's true.
But I do like the reworking of Kong too, King Kong. I like the kind of like backdrop and kind of like the moral they're trying to say with King Kong about like, because it takes place during like the Vietnam War, so there's kind of like a point to King Kong to the same as there's a point to Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of sets up Kong versus Godzilla nicely.
I agree with, I think, most of your takes there. So my thoughts on the current MonsterVerse, there's several things that they do really, really well. I think one of the reasons I love these movies so much with just giant creatures is I love to be in a movie watching this gigantic beast and just being in awe of the size and scale of it. That's something that the original Godzilla gets done really well, which, considering the limited special effects they had, is really remarkable. It's something that Pacific Rim did really well, which is sort of ancillary to these and is definitely related to it, just showing like, oh, here's the scale of these creatures. Wow, this makes me feel really small. Wow, I'm going to ponder the nature of the universe and how small I am compared to it. That's something that I think the Godzilla movies in the current MonsterVerse have done really. It's a credit to the computer animators here. They're spectacular. Like the Kong versus Godzilla fight was amazing. And Brian, me and you went to Godzilla King of the Monsters, which I agree is the weakest of the four so far. But being there, me and Brian shelled out for like the fancy seats that would like rock and rumble as the fights were going on. It was fantastic. I had
Which
such
we
a great
didn't know
time
was
in the
a thing
theater.
until we got there, and then it was
Yeah.
just amazing.
So that spectacle they do great. Now, in terms of the plot, the human story, at best, it's fine. I don't think there's been a human story that's been great. I think some of the plots on Kong Skull Island come the closest, but really it's good enough to not drag it down, I think is what I would say. But let's talk about Godzilla himself. Do you think these current movies get Godzilla the correct way? Because, Godzilla, he's either the cartoony character on Monster Island in the old movies, or he's death and nuclear destruction personified. Where does this Godzilla come down on that spectrum, and do you like the way that it came down? Drew, we'll start with you.
I think they definitely, like we've already talked about, tried to start him out as the more serious. I feel like they've still tried to keep him as a more serious character. He hasn't done any of those crazy kicks or attacks that we've seen in the other movies yet. So I'll still say that they're still trying to keep him more serious. But I guess we'll have to see if they have another movie, what they make him do. But I'd be surprised if they ever get him to that point of ridiculousness.
Well, I mean, what's money? So you never know. But Jeremy, what's your take?
I think, well, this Godzilla, they frame him as like king of the monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And like his whole point is to bring like regrowth and relife to Earth, especially in King of the Monsters. That's like the whole kind of subplot is that the Titans will like work to like once they destroy stuff, there's something with their like blood or Godzilla's blood that regrows forests and different things, and that's kind of like one of the at the end credit scene, I'm spoiling stuff for people, so spoiler alert.
Let's just say now, spoiler alerts, but come on, people. You know what's happening in these movies, so there's not that much. So go ahead, Jared.
But, like, at the end scenes of, like, King of the Monsters, there's, like, newspaper... Or is this the first God? No, this was King of the Monsters. There's, like, news clips of, like, all the rainforest is growing back. Like, San Francisco was destroyed in the first movie, but now it's, like, this great pristine stuff. So it's like Godzilla's almost, like, correcting the humans, like, destroying the Earth. Is how they're kind of reframing Godzilla for the first couple of movies. Mm-hmm. Like, that's his job. So anyone who threatens that, like, the balance that he creates is, like, his enemy. And so that's, like, always what's happening. Is, like, who's going to come challenge King Kong? Who's going to challenge Godzilla and make it so the world will be destroyed?
Absolutely. So a couple points from what you just said. Me and Brian went to go see Godzilla versus Kong with my brother-in-law. Shout out to Garrett. And Garrett is a youth pastor and kind of a theology nerd. So he'd never seen Godzilla movies before. But something that struck him about it was how the sort of mythology in the MonsterVerse they actually do a reasonably good job of echoing a lot of, like, ancient mythologies, where you look at Greece, you look at Babylon, you look at, China, Japan. A lot of them have this conception of, in the beginning, there was, like, this chaos that reigned. And then there were these titans, these cosmological beings that sort of wrested order from chaos, and that's how humanity sprang up and all this stuff. And you can see how they're kind of doing this sort of same thing with the MonsterVerse here, where I think it's smart that they do this. They have this all-encompassing explanation for all the giant monsters, where they're all titans from a former era deep in the past of Earth. And they sort of fill this mythological role. And I think that's actually pretty interesting. And another point you mentioned, Jared and Drew, that I think is really important to mention as well, is that Godzilla was the hero in this series from the beginning. When I saw the first Godzilla in 2014, I was expecting it to just be Godzilla. He destroys a city and we have to stop him. But instead
they faked you out. They famously and iconically faked you out with their trailer.
Exactly. They faked me out along with the movie going public.
Had, what's his name? Walter White. What's his real name?
Bryan Cranston.
Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
They had Bryan Cranston in all the trailers, like he was going to be the star, and Godzilla was going to destroy everything. But then he died super quick, and then it was all about Emily Olsen and what's his name, who then became Silver Surfer and Scarlet Witch in the Marvel movies, which was confusing because that happened right after. But that's that's different pop culture stuff. But there's a lot of lots of spillover between Marvel and the MonsterVerse.
Yeah, they're twins in the Marvel universe, and they're husband and wife in the MonsterVerse. So
which was very weird.
Yes,
I know in one of the comics, Godzilla actually fights, I think, the Avengers. So maybe there's a crossover there sometime.
Ooh, that would be
cool.
The ultimate mashup, and I would pay money to see that.
Brian's in the front row for that.
Scarlet Witch would win.
That would be an interesting matchup. I don't know.
He's got some powers that we haven't talked about yet.
If she can control an entire town, you don't know. Maybe she can control a monster.
She can do more than that, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I mean, let's put it this way. If Godzilla just gets his radiation breath on that little bubble she made in WandaVision, can it withstand the radiation breath?
Yes.
I would...
Oh.
I would say no.
Okay, well, that just shows this movie has to be made. So, Brian, over to you. What did you think about Godzilla being the hero basically from the jump in the current MonsterVerse, where in the first movie it's clear, oh, these other, like, giant cockroach things are the real bad guys, and Godzilla needs to fight them. What'd you think of that?
I really liked it. To kind of build off Jeremy's a little bit, too, yeah, I really liked the story arc of Godzilla being, like, the guardian and protector of Earth to bring balance to it. I thought that was a good storyline because in my mind, I'm like, I always want to root for Godzilla because he's awesome. And it made me want to root for Godzilla because it's like, yeah, he is coming chaotically, but he is coming with the purpose to bring order and peace again. So, like in, the King of Monsters, all these other monsters are, well, some of them are there to bring chaos and destroy, where Godzilla is there to bring peace again. So he's not just there to destroy, but to, bring order back to Earth.
And while we're on this, go ahead, Bry.
Yeah, and even in the new one, like, you can kind of sense a little bit like he isn't just going on this rampage. Like, you can tell kind of from the beginning that mankind is starting to do something to bring chaos back into the world, where Godzilla isn't just destroying to destroy, where they're trying to make you think that, but then, at the end you see that the Mecha Godzilla is actually the bringer of chaos, not Godzilla this time. So he's always trying to protect, so...
I am liking this. I'm liking this. So something to sort of add on to that. In King of the Monsters, the main antagonist for Godzilla is King Ghidorah. First of all, is it Ghidorah or Ghidorah? I've heard it both. What do you guys think?
I say Ghidorah.
I like Ghidorah more.
Okay, Jer?
I'll go with what everyone else is saying.
All right, I'll just follow the crowd then. So King Ghidorah is the main antagonist. And first of all, they did a great job with the design. Ghidorah looked terrifying. He's this giant golden three-headed dragon with these sort of bat wings that shoots lightning, and the three heads are always right. They did such a good job. But
and he's an alien.
Yeah,
Yep.
Exactly.
Win-win.
He's not part of this system that Godzilla's the protector of. He comes in from the outside. He comes from space. And he's sort of the main agent of chaos. And like you said, Brian, in Godzilla versus Kong, the bringer of the chaos is this human technology that's trying to rival Godzilla. So I think there's actually something there, guys. I like it. So switching gears now to the current Godzilla versus Kong movie. Something that I have found absolutely fascinating is when Godzilla King of the Monsters comes out, again, 2 years ago, I felt like me and Brian saw it, like we talked to Drew about it, we talked to Jer about it, no one else seemed to care. Like it was a nothing in the pop culture context, it didn't seem like. It was a disappointment in the box office, yada, yada, yada. But Godzilla vs. Kong has actually done really well, it seems. And it's been a big part of the national conversation. People are talking about it. It's on social media. It's getting broadcast all over the place. Start with you, Drew. Why do you think there's been such a difference between Godzilla fighting, Rodan and Ghidorah versus Godzilla versus Kong? What is about Godzilla and Kong that gets the attention?
For one thing, I think Kong is more of like it's a little more famous in America. I mean, he was an American icon of horror back when it was made. So I think that more Americans are a little more used to and they know of King Kong more so than like Ghidorah or Rodan. And so it's kind of just having two big names on a big fight, like Tyson versus oh gosh.
You're going through the memory banks like, big 90s boxers. Who are they?
Holyfield, I don't know. But,
there we go.
but yeah, so it's like Kong versus Godzilla. Like everybody knows Godzilla and everybody pretty much knows Kong. So I feel like with that's how it kind of just got as big as it's gotten.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything, Jeremy or Brian, anything you want to add to why you think Godzilla versus Kong has made such a larger cultural impact than the other ones?
I think it's because you don't need too big of a story. You don't need a plot. So like other big like mashups like Batman versus Superman was terrible. But like you have to have a little bit of a plot. Like this movie, you just need to find some way to have King Kong and Godzilla fight each other that somewhat makes sense, and then people are happy to see King Kong and Godzilla fight. Like the story is secondary.
Yeah. Yeah, you need a...
People just wanted to be entertained.
Yeah, there's a reason why Batman and Superman have to want to kill each other. They're not just going to naturally do that. But for this one, it's like, yeah, Godzilla and Kong, they're rivals. So they're just going to friggin' fight if they're ever in the same room together.
That's the whole plot. And it's like,
yeah.
That makes sense.
Yep.
It does.
Oh, man. Anything you wanted to add to that, Bri?
No, yeah, I agree with both of you. And just, Yeah, I like Drew's point too, because I'm like, I think King Kong and Godzilla is just so iconic worldwide too.
Hmm.
Like, I think that is what everybody thinks of when they think of Godzilla, they think of King Kong. So I
Hmm.
think people are just more naturally drawn to that. And also, kind of going off what Jeremy said too, like, I think one of the reasons why King of the Monsters didn't work so well comparatively to Kong versus Godzilla is because they almost tried to get too much into it with like too many monsters too.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
it's like you really only needed like two or three monsters in it, where they had each of them had like teams of monsters fighting with like Mothra and Rodan, and like some were
And
good, some
Mothra
were
was
bad.
barely in the movie.
I know, and that's
Mhm.
like,
That was a bummer. That
and
was a
that's
bummer.
yeah, and that's where it was just kind of like for like fans of Godzilla, it's like, man, I wish we would have had like a whole thing on these other ones instead of just sprinkling them in. Where Kong, it's just like you could just focus on Kong and Godzilla, with the Mecha Godzilla kind of coming in at the end as the big
Mhm.
antagonist. So
I also
Yeah,
think people didn't know that the MonsterVerse was a thing.
yeah, that's
yeah.
probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Drew was kind of saying that too, where it's like, yeah,
Like
Kong
people
is,
didn't know they were
yeah,
all connected until it's
yep,
like, oh, Godzilla, King Kong, that's cool.
yeah,
Yeah, I will say when Kong Skull Island came out, it wasn't clear to me that this was all part of the same universe. I just thought it was another like one-off Kong movie. So it took a while to put the pieces together. And something else I'll add, just in terms of Godzilla and Kong and why it works so well, I definitely agree with all what you all were saying. And I think another element is the contrast between them is so basic and so like viscerally appealing. Like Godzilla, he's like a dinosaur, this reptile, like primitive, primal. And Godzilla is, he's an ape, so he's kind of humanoid and has more human emotions. And it's a great contrast. Like I loved looking at all the posters for Godzilla versus Kong, just seeing them juxtaposed against each other, and I thought it was just a great setup. So now let's get to the question of the day, guys. Godzilla versus Kong. What did you think? Start with you, Jer.
What do I think about the movie, or who do I think would win in a fight?
Let's start with the movie, but then we can give our own play-by-play later.
Okay. I liked it. I was entertained throughout the whole story. I liked that there was a surprise Mechagodzilla reveal. Was fun. And then it was fun to see everyone. It was fun to see Godzilla and King Kong team up. Like that was
That
fun because you're like, oh yeah, they're coming together.
that was beautiful.
So I think they did a good job and they hit all the things that people would want to see in a King Kong Godzilla movie. Them fight each other for a while, then them team up against a Mecha Godzilla with a surprise entrance. So I think they did pretty good.
All right, Drew, what did you think?
I really liked the movie. Like Jared was saying, I think they gave the people what they wanted, a really good fight between two big famous monsters, and then fought a monster that's a little more like iconic with probably the people that are watch Godzilla.
Yeah.
But for me, like personally, I really enjoyed all the fight sequences. Like I'm glad they weren't too, because like I think with Godzilla 2014, a lot of the critics were saying, at least with the fans, were saying like we barely got to see Godzilla and
That's what I was saying, by the way.
barely got to see any of the fight or of him destroying things and fighting with the Mutos. So with this, I definitely wasn't disappointed with all the fights. They were great, and then like the person that I wanted to win won between those two.
You wanted
And,
Mecha Godzilla to win?
no.
I'm Team Godzilla too.
And yeah, I will say I am a little disappointed that they didn't have Godzilla's theme song in this movie because that's what really made it for me with the last one with Godzilla King of the Monsters when they were able to, I guess, buy the rights to that song and they used it in one of his fights.
Okay, that is cool.
And that's when I remember I got chills in that part. But I mean, that's just kind of semantics and something little to pick on. So
Okay. No, that's a good point. I'm going to watch for that next time I see it. Jeremy, really quick, I remember me and you talked our mom into buying the 1963 King Kong versus Godzilla. Really corny. It's the dudes in suits fighting, but we watched it like 20 million times. I was Team Godzilla. You were always Team Kong. Have you stayed Team Kong?
I don't think so. I think I like Godzilla more than King Kong.
Oh man, I'm really
But
proud of you. You're showing growth.
thanks.
Is that in general or just for this universe of it?
I think overall, I think I enjoy Godzilla stories more than King Kong stories.
We're all just sort of pausing and staring like, what do I think? So Brian, your take on the latest movie?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this movie. It was funny. I came home and I started telling my wife the plot of the movie. And she just is looking at me like, how did you enjoy this movie? Because she's like, there's no plot to this. I'm like, yes, there is. It's just enough to be interesting. All you want to see are King Kong and Godzilla fighting. And you got that. So it was awesome. And the fight scenes were amazing. The physics were a little iffy because I'm like, how could Godzilla swim through a battleship, but then he could stand on it and like punch King Kong and then it didn't break. So I'm like, that seemed a little iffy to me. But yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, let's put it this way. So I remember, Brian, as me and you were walking out of the theater, I think I told you, I don't know if that was a good movie or not, but I don't care because I loved it so much.
I know, and I think you say that. I think you have to say that about every single one of the movies in this genre because it's
exactly.
like it's not going to win any like amazing awards because it's like, you know, it's not like a great story, but it's like, what do you want to see in a monster movie? You want to see big monsters fight. And then when you get into some of the nuances that we've been talking about, like there are some like underlying things about Godzilla and about King Kong that you can appreciate when you've grown up watching the series, like these movies. But yeah, I also really liked how, you know, you are on King Kong's side at the beginning and you're like, what is up with Godzilla right now? Kong needs to put him in his place. But then they team up at the end. And it was awesome.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for the listeners. Whether or not you intend to see this movie, I think it would be beneficial to discuss the plot briefly, because when it's described all at once, it may sound a bit crazy. Okay, so
My wife thought that, so.
the movie opens. Godzilla is the undisputed king of monsters. We find out Kong has been hidden. Somehow they've captured him in this giant dome that Godzilla can't find for some reason. And they decide they need to take...
It's Skull Island. But what happened was all of the storm encompassed Skull Island and killed everyone but Kong and that little girl. And then they enclosed Skull Island. So he's still on Skull Island.
Yes. So then they decide they need to take King Kong to Antarctica because Antarctica is a portal to the center of the Earth, which is hollow and is the source of all Titan life. So they bring him there, and the Earth is hollow. King Kong can find his way back for reasons, and there's sunlight in the hollow Earth and air, and a giant civilization, and Kong finds a giant battle axe. And meanwhile, Godzilla has blown a hole all the way to the center of the Earth with his radiation breath. And Kong goes up the hole all the way from the center of the Earth, and they fight. And then Mechagodzilla comes, and then they fight.
Well, with Mechagodzilla, there's a further thing happening with Millie Bobby Brown.
Yes, 11 from Stranger Things.
Yep. Good cast for this genre.
So Mechagodzilla is being controlled by Ghidorah's head because it has like powers, but it needs more of this blue energy radioactive stuff that they find
from the hollow Earth.
From the hollow Earth. And so they find that and they are able to send that up, and that's what gets Mechagodzilla going. But then something crazy happens because it's supposed to be controlled by a person. But this blue stuff overwhelms the person and kills the person, and then Mechagodzilla gets a mind of its own and just starts...
like Ghidorah cells or something.
Yep.
And so that plot is uncovered by 11 from Stranger Things and a conspiracy podcaster. So shout out for podcasters finally getting their due.
And also Ricky Bobby from the Wilder People. Not Ricky Bobby. Ricky Baker. Sorry, Ricky Bobby's the race.
Ricky Baker.
Yeah, Ricky Baker. Also a great movie. But sorry.
All right, so the plot when you lay it out is there's no sense in thinking about parts of it too much. But as we pointed out, there's sort of a serious thematic angle of, mankind raising up against, Godzilla, forces of nature, all that. But let's be real. The fights are what makes this movie, and the fights are spectacular. Drew, what was your favorite fight scene and what was your favorite moment in the movie?
My favorite fight scene, I would probably have to say the second when they fight in the city, because they had already had their encounter. Godzilla had, I guess, technically won because he basically drowned King Kong. But I just liked how Godzilla was so mad at King Kong that he just literally blew fire through the earth and into the hollow earth, which is, I guess, part of the ridiculous part where these movies are getting a little more ridiculous. But then Kong comes out of the hole and then they're just ready to go at it. I just love that because I'm like that's just Godzilla.
Yep.
All right, how about you, Brian? What's your favorite part?
I would agree with Drew. I think that fight scene in, was it Hong Kong, right? That's where they fought.
Yeah, it was Hong Kong.
Yeah, I think that fight scene was awesome. King Kong had like a radioactive battle axe that he kept getting charged,
which was awesome,
with Godzilla's fire blasting, and that was amazing. One thing on the Hollow Earth that I thought was interesting. I am low-key very into conspiracy theories, and I listen to some.
Oh, you're not low-key into conspiracy theories.
I'm high-key
Brian.
into it. Yeah. I am. I hide it a little bit so people don't think I'm crazy. But
now you're talking about it on the podcast. But continue.
It's true.
But actually, the Earth is hollow.
I don't. I will preface this. I don't think the Earth is hollow. But it was interesting in the opening credits. It was interesting in the opening credits when they were like referencing Hollow Earth stuff. I was like, a lot of this stuff is actually like big into Hollow Earth conspiracy theories. So it was like they were trying to like tie in some like, in quotation marks, real things of Hollow Earth.
It's like a real conspiracy theory. Yeah,
it is a real one. It is a real one that I don't believe in. I listened to it because it was interesting. But anyway.
All right, Joe, your favorite part in the movie?
I liked when they had to use the hovercraft because, spoiler alert, Godzilla claws King Kong's chest so much and then steps on him that his heart stops.
Godzilla kind of kicks Kong's butt at the end, let's be real.
So King Kong is like dying and they're like, the people are like, we have to save him. And so they take the hovercrafts that they used to get to the center of the earth and exploded it on top of him with like an electronic blast. And it worked to restart his heart. And
that
immediately he was ready to jump up and fight Mechagodzilla.
with a dislocated shoulder.
Oh, yeah. He had to pop that back in.
Yeah. Popped it right back in and was ready to go.
That was amazing. I will echo lots of what you guys were saying. First of all, let's give a shout out to the first fight between Godzilla and Kong, which happens like in the middle of the ocean. Kong is being led to Antarctica for reasons, and he's sort of on one battleship. There's this whole fleet of battleships. Godzilla shows up, and Godzilla destroys some of the battleships, and then they're sort of fighting, partly underwater, partly hopping from battleship to battleship. It's absolutely spectacular, just the way they figured out the mechanics of that. And Godzilla wins, even though King Kong had the full might of the U.S. Navy on his side. So score one for Godzilla there. Then you go to Hong Kong. The way they had the buildings in different like neon colors, and they're like reflecting off of them as they're fighting. It looks so good. My favorite part, let's be real. Mechagodzilla shows up. He starts taking on Godzilla. Looks like Mechagodzilla is going to win. Then Kong relocates his shoulder, takes his battle axe, and they start teaming up on him. And big spoiler alert, Godzilla charges up King Kong's radioactive axe with his fire breath, and King Kong uses the axe to destroy Mechagodzilla. It was so dumb, but I loved it so much. It got me so amped. I almost stood up and cheered in the theater. I loved it so much.
We should have stand up.
We really should have.
Yeah.
You know our dad would have. He's
know.
very emotive in these
He would
movies.
have.
So there we are, Godzilla versus Kong. We're actually already over time, but wrapping this up, we talked about Godzilla the good, the serious, brooding, like 1954 original. Godzilla the really silly, where he's fighting all sorts of weird aliens and giant lobsters, and he can talk. And sort of this MonsterVerse, which, does a reasonably good job of trying to split it. What are our takes on Godzilla? Is he a serious character, a goofy character? What do we make with this pop culture phenomenon? Drew, I'll start with you.
He's a serious character, but he does a lot of goofy things, I guess, um, because he has to, I guess. I don't know. The more that we talk about it, like him charging up King Kong's axe, that's goofy, but it's done in a serious way, I guess.
Yeah.
So, I guess he tries to be serious, but he's not always portrayed that way.
Brian, what's your take?
I mean, I would agree with Drew. I think it's serious in this one, but yeah, I don't know. It's just like you can't be too serious with this type of genre because it's like they're giant monsters fighting each other. So it's like, of course, it's going to be a little goofy and ridiculous. But I think they make it serious while still having fun with it, like knowing that people come just to see the monsters fight. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'll sort of add my 2 cents and throw it over to Jeremy. There were times during this conversation, like when we were talking about some of the thematic things in the current MonsterVerse or the thematic elements of the original. It's like, yeah, this is serious stuff. This could be real art. Then there are other times it's like, so then Godzilla blew a hole to the center of the earth using his fire breath, and like, oh, okay, maybe I should think twice about this. It's both. It's both at once. Sometimes it goes from one to the other in the course of a couple films. But there's something really profound about dealing with battles with creatures so big and so imposing that humankind, with all of our technology and stuff, just can do nothing to stop it. I think there's something very, very useful in watching movies that make you feel very small. But I don't know. There are worse things than watching a silly movie with some guys in rubber costumes hitting each other, too. So, Jeremy, I want you to answer the question I presented to you. And then, in closing, you said you had a scientific paper detailing the King Kong versus Godzilla fight. I'd love to have the findings.
All right. So I think that Godzilla can be fun and campy, but also serious at the same time. You can have dualities and multitudes in Godzilla. So I also think we have forgot to mention the ultimate moral of the story from Shin Godzilla is that
that's one we should have talked about again.
Japanese bureaucracy will just lead to total destruction. Is the real moral of the story.
I'm glad you mentioned Shin Godzilla. That 2016, that's another one that making serious points. But yeah, keep going.
But I think Godzilla is at the same time serious, but at the same time fun. And I think that's that.
Now, on to your scientific paper.
I mean, I don't think it's a paper. It was a blog post for a science magazine. Kind of talk about the strengths and weaknesses if they were real fighters. And kind of boils down to, after a lot of debate, it was ruled that King Kong would be the winner because Kong has such intelligence. Like, if you would compare brain sizes between the two, it's not even close. And Godzilla's pretty dumb. And Kong is very intelligent and athletic and could use his long arms to destroy Godzilla.
He does have the reach.
They said Godzilla's reptilian brain has no match for Kong's primate frontal cortex in decision making.
Whoa. Strongly disagree. First of all, yes, Kong is smart. That's granted. But Godzilla is a smart creature too. Now, we don't know that Godzilla is a reptile. He could be some other order of being altogether and be pretty intelligent. He could sense when that evil corporation was making Mechagodzilla, and he's the one who thought to light up King Kong's battle axe at the climactic scene to charge it to beat Mechagodzilla.
I'm just going to say salmon can sense where they need to go to mate, so I don't think sensing things necessarily equates intelligence, is all I'm saying.
But Godzilla is a warrior. His sense are all for its battle sense. He doesn't need to use like the prefrontal cortex or whatever. It's all brainstem. His brainstem makes him an unbeatable warrior. Drew, Brian, do you agree with the blog post, or do you agree with my correct opinion?
I think it depends on, are we talking about the Godzilla and King Kong that we saw in the movie, or just the one, like, because Godzilla has a lot of different powers that
I
weren't
think
shown in the
you
movie.
can choose any Godzilla you want and any King Kong you want.
Because
You can-
Godzilla is able to manipulate metal, and
That's from one of the trippier movies.
and he
That
actually has the
wasn't-
ability
That
of
wasn't
flight.
figured into these calculations.
In Godzilla versus Hedorah, Godzilla is in hot pursuit of his enemy and needed to travel a great distance. And he accomplished this by directing his atomic breath at the ground and force blasting his way towards the other creature. So,
You see, is this great cinema or what? Brian, what's your take? Godzilla or King Kong? Who, if you're writing the movie, who wins?
I think that study takes a lot of presumptions about the intelligence of Godzilla.
yeah.
Also, I'm like, a crocodile, I'm way smarter than a crocodile, but they could beat me up. I'm not gonna win a fight against a crocodile just because I have a bigger brain, you know?
Or you would use tools.
That's true. I mean, I guess if I have a gun, I could beat a crocodile.
Or
in
a
theory.
glowing blue battle axe that you got from the
Also
center of the
true.
earth. Yeah.
Also true.
That you got from your family. That was his family's weapon.
Oh.
The
If it
Mellema
was a
axe.
family weapon, then yeah, maybe I could. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I would actually agree, though, that King Kong might... I don't know. I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I do think
This is
pre-show I said
shocking.
I think Godzilla would win. But now that I'm thinking about it more, I'm like, I can see where having the more
I'm
intelligence...
more shocked because before we started recording this, you said whatever the scientific paper says, I'm just going to go against it. And now you're agreeing with it.
That is true. Darn it.
Holding the green room conversations against you. So
Yeah,
Well,
those are off
so
the record.
Well, I made it on the record.
All right, so the panel ends up divided, and maybe that's a good place to end it. We're actually way over time, but it's Godzilla, so it has to be a monster-sized episode. So, guys, thank you all for joining me. The Mellema brothers and Drew, the honorary Mellema brothers. So the four Mellema brothers getting together to talk Godzilla. That's a good evening in my book. And, well, things are winding down at the Anselm Digital Pub. The fire is down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.